Hi everybody, welcome back to Mel Did It Herself. Today we are working on some bar height swivel stools. I actually have 3, but here's 2 of them that I got from somebody who follows me on Instagram. Thanks again, Jen. This project's going to be very similar to my last video, but I thought it would be good to go through the process of showing you how to take these apart, especially because they're kind of, they have like a certain way of taking them apart. So you can see here there's 2 holes in the base. You kind of have to swivel it around until you can see 2 of the screws. Then you can undo those, and then there's 2 other screws if you continue around, like there's 4 corners essentially. So that's how you can access those to take it apart. I don't know if people know this. I was like looking at the base of it the other way when it's right side up, and it was kind of confusing at first, but it's really easy once you figure that out to get them 2 of them off, and then you can just get the little footrest part here off as well, and they're just attached by screws as well. Way easier to paint this with it all taken apart. As always, then taking all the different pieces and giving them a good clean. I always use TSP and some shop rags to do this. It's basically a heavy duty degreaser, and just going through all the little nooks and crannies. There was a bunch of dust and gunk on that top of the base there where, you know, it was like in between the seat and the base. And it's just an old piece of furniture, so you never really know what's on there. So it's always important to do this step and then go through after with just a wet cloth and wipe off any of the residue so that you're left with a good surface for painting. Per usual, I like to show how much dirt I got off of the piece when cleaning it, so do not skip this step. These did not look dirty to the eye, but they definitely were. So I did choose to prime these pieces. I used this Kills Original Interior Primer that I got from Lowe's, blocks heavy stains and odors. I don't always prime my pieces, but I chose to do this one because number one, one of the stools was already painted like sort of white. The person I got them from had started to paint one, but then didn't have the time, so she stopped. So they weren't starting from the same spot in terms of color. I wanted them to be a little bit more uniform in case that ended up showing through in the final finish, number one. Number 2, because it's an old like all wood piece, I didn't know if there would be any bleed through, so I wanted to ensure that I was taking preventative measures to stop that from happening. So I opted to use a primer. This is an oil-based primer, which is why it looks like this and looks horrendous. After a good start, it goes pure white. And I did choose to put this on with a foam brush because I'm too cheap to use a chip brush or a good brush and then go through the trouble of cleaning it properly. So it took a lot longer than it needed to. And a little bit of a hack, because I don't pour this primer into like a separate container. If you put a piece of old painter's tape, this is just left over from a project before, on the edge here, you can use that to wipe off your brush, whatever you're using, so you're not doing it on the side, like on the edges, which ends up making it harder to get a good seal on the like underneath the lip of when you put the lid on it. It can kind of build up over time, and then you don't get a good seal, and it can make your product dry out. So putting that piece of painter's tape is a really good quick hack that I learned from my friend Amanda over at the DIY Home on Instagram. So I just went through and gave these all a thorough prime. I only did 1 coat of primer. I could have done 2, and it would have been like a bright white, and it would have been more kind of like thorough of a like base, I guess, to work off of. Because I was gonna do a dark color anyways, I wanted to avoid it being too bright white of a base anyways. And I'm not gonna lie, it was really cold in the garage and it took a long time to do this, so I just kind of got lazy and I was like, you know what, 1 coat is gonna be fine, and it ended up looking beautiful in the end, so I think I went the right way. So the color that I chose is Fusion Mineral Paint in the color Midnight Blue. This went on pretty light at first, but after a second, I did about 2.5 coats, 2 coats mostly, and then there was a couple of spots that just needed a little bit of a going over. I'm using my zebra paintbrush. I use the round paintbrush, and then I also use my Dixie Belle, the Belle brush for this. The Dixie Belle one is just a little bit more compact, the brush bristles. So it was nice for that second coat just to get a really thick coat without putting a lot of paint and making it gloopy, if that makes sense. To clean up the footrest, I'm using my tried and true barkeeper's friend and some fine steel wool. Basically, this is what we are starting with. It just had some kind of like weird tinginess, a little bit of corrosion, a little bit of rust, but I knew it could get cleaned up really nicely, and it did, which is awesome. A little bit of elbow grease, and it's obviously a chrome, which it looked pretty nice, and there's definitely no like corrosion to the touch. It was just a little bit aesthetic. You can see here, like it's all, nothing's raised. So it was a good base to do spray paint because I knew I wanted it to be a little bit more goldy and bronzy instead of this chrome. So I started off by doing this trim clad rust in the black. It's a paint and primer. I'm using it for the purpose of primer. Did a good thorough coat of that on both sides. And then after it dried, I went through with this Rust-Oleum Satin Bronze, my new favorite spray paint. It's like a beautiful bronzy color. It's not too gold, it's not too yellow or too brown. It's like really nice. I think I did 2 coats of this just to be safe on both sides. I don't know that this was the best thing to put it on top of. I probably should have done cardboard because it's kind of almost aluminum-y, aluminum foil-y. So the paint kind of stuck a little bit. It was also in like too cold of conditions. I live in Canada. Gotta do what you gotta do, and I didn't want to spray paint inside, so I probably would have changed those things if I did it again, but alas, here we are. It turned out fine. And once everything was all thoroughly dried, I brought it inside. I let everything sit inside for a couple hours just to kind of come to room temperature. I didn't want anything to be too brittle as I was screwing it back into the wood, just because it's quite cold. It's probably minus 15 degrees Celsius on average here right now. I live in Ottawa, so I just wanted to make sure I wasn't gonna potentially like snap any of the pieces, or you know, just to err on the side of caution. So I just went through and put all the screws into, or through, I guess, the footrest into the base here. And this required just a little bit of like finagling just to make sure everything lined up and was level and flat in the way that it should be. And then this footrest kind of holds those base legs into place too. So just making sure that they're all kind of evenly spaced at the right angle. So when you sit on it, you're not gonna like collapse it or like damage it in any way. And here's what we are looking at. I then went through and attached to the base as well to the top, like the seating part, but it was a struggle. I should have had somebody help me, so I didn't film that. And then the only last thing is that one of these on the side didn't have one of the little buttons to cover those screws. It had been lost at some point in time. So it would look like this. I should have done this at the beginning, but I just kind of got lazy and didn't order the thing. So I did get these from Home Depot. They're called screw hole buttons. They're 1/2 inch, and it was about like $4 for the pack. It's a 1/2 inch diameter across the opening of the hole. That's how I measured it. There's some different size ones. So I think this is kind of like your average size, but just make sure if you're trying to fill similar holes that you're measuring yourself. And I'm just using a little bit of my tried and true Gorilla Glue, just a very light thin coat on the edge, gluing those in and let it sit. And then I went through with a little tiny painter's kind of like artist brush here, and I'm just touching that up. And I did 2 coats of that, and it was pretty flawless once I was done. So just a quick reminder of where these guys started out. And here is what they turned out like. Super happy with how these turned out. I think they still have that vintage feel with the shapes, but I think they look so much more modern and a little bit more trendy. I'm really obsessed with this navy color, this Fusion Mineral Paint Midnight Blue. So I was very happy to use it again, and I hope it can go into someone's home. They're currently listed, but I have a feeling that they might go quick. So fingers crossed on that. And again, these are swivel bar stools too. So I don't know if you guys used to have these in your house. I definitely did back in the 90s growing up. And so they're a little nostalgic for me too. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed. Follow me on Instagram at meldeditherself, and I'll see you next time. Bye.